I loved catching fireflies and playing outside when I was young. They would dance on my fingers as if they were diamond rings. Loretta Lynn said something to that effect years ago. My wife and I were walking the dogs outside our neighborhood just a couple weeks ago, and it was at dusk as the sun began to set, and outside our neighborhood is a long ditch line. It goes about 200 yards. And in that ditch line, you look along the road, you see some briars, some broken glass, and then right behind that some shrubs, and then right behind that some tall trees. And as the sun begins to set, it gets really dark there. And as we're walking the dogs, I notice a flicker of light, and then another flicker of light. Before I knew it, they were flickering everywhere. Fireflies were everywhere. It took me back to when I was a child. I imagined catching fireflies when I was a child, and all my friends and I would run together for our adventure. We would gather together, oh, go get your nets, go get your mason jars, and let's gather back up here in a few minutes. And this is in the 70s. You stayed outside from dusk till dawn. And we'd run back to our houses at dark, grab our stuff, and more often than not, we were probably barefooted. We'd get back together and we'd spread out along this ditch line with our mason jars, our nets, and we'd catch these fireflies. It was our adventure. We were going to see how many fireflies we could catch. And we didn't worry about the briars. We didn't worry about falling and scraping our toes or our knees. We pushed that worry aside. We didn't even think about it. Because you're a child, you don't think about the dangers that might be lurking. We didn't think about the dark or snakes that may have possibly been there. All we know is we were trying to fill those jars with the many little fireflies we could. And we had so much fun running up and down and skipping and jumping. Woohoo! We're catching these fireflies. And then we'd gather back together and we'd compare our fireflies. And it was magical. We'd hold them up. Oh, the magic we had within those little jars. I got to thinking as my wife and I were walking these dogs, I said, what happens to us as adults? At what point in life do we stop seeking the magic? At what point in life do we lose our sense of adventure? At what point in life do we just let worry permeate our being? And at what point in life do we stop having fun? I think what happens to us is we get knocked down. We got people telling us, oh, you need to major in this. You need to study this in college. You need to have this job. You need to raise your children this way. And before you know it, we forget who we were. My friend, it's the saddest story, but it's like a country song. He lost his job, he lost his marriage, he lost his mom, all within 6 months. He was literally living in a shed behind my house that had air conditioning. But he had an adventure within him, and that was to take care of his daughter. That was his adventure for the moment. So he pushed that worry of having lost his job behind him. He was very close to his mom, but he pushed that worry of his loss of his mom behind him. He pushed that worry of his divorce behind him. And he took a job delivering produce, which was a major pay cut for him at that time. And he delivered his produce daily, and in the evenings, he would work on finding a new job, improving his life, talking to his daughter on the phone, and when he'd have her, he would take her on little daddy-daughter dates, and they would have fun together. And his jar was filled with magic all the time. Within another 6 months, he started going to church, accepted the Lord as his Savior, and he met this man who offered him a similar job he had before the one he lost. He's making double the money he was before, and his jar is filled with magic. He's remarried, he's very close to his daughter, and it's the neatest story. I have another friend of mine. I love him to death, but he died at 25 and he'll be buried at 65. He doesn't see the adventure around him. He has these 2 wonderful kids, a wife, he has a great job, but he doesn't see his adventure. All he sees is the worry. He's worried about what people will think of him if he goes and buys a motorcycle. He's worried about what the bosses will think if he doesn't do just right on the job. So he's in a constant state of worry, and he doesn't have any fun with his life, so his jar is never filled with magic. I want to tell you 3 stories, and they all have something in common. They all have bicycles in common. The first is my mom. I received a call December 28, 2015. They said, you got to get to your mom's house now. And I arrived at her house, and her body was laying on the floor with a blanket over it. Of course, I was saddened. I lost my mom, but as I looked around the room, something was different. Her mobility chair was clear across the room. Her walker was folded up neatly in the corner. Her cane was in another corner, but she obviously had on her prosthetic leg. My mom had lost her leg a couple years before. Even though I was sad outwardly, I was sort of happy inside because I knew that my mom died living her adventure. You see, before she had her leg removed and she had walked around in pain for 2 years with basically a dead leg, she told us as she was under anesthetic, getting ready to go to sleep, I'm going to ride a bike. We're like, okay, you're 70 plus years old, you're going to ride a bike, I'm sure you will. And then she went to sleep. And then after surgery, she woke up, I'm going to ride a bike. And she's trying to sip on a little water and a little ice. We're like, okay, Mom, you're going to ride a bike. We're proud of you. Once her little nub healed, and that's what she called it, her little nub, she had this prosthetic built. She was an Alabama fan, so she had it decorated in Alabama garb. It was $40,000 prosthetic, so she could, it was almost bionic leg. It was the neatest thing because she started going to the gym. She started doing water aerobics. She started working out. She was chasing her adventure to ride that bike. She didn't know what we saw was that my mom wouldn't use her walker when she got really strong. She didn't want to use her cane when she got really strong, so she fell a lot of times. She pushed that worry behind her because her goal was to ride a bike. And I could see my mom smiling all the time as she would run. In her mind, she was running, but she would have that cane a lot of times trying to walk, and she'd try to walk faster. And she would do push-ups. As a matter of fact, I went over her house one day, and she just fell on the floor. And I thought she fell, and she said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. She starts doing push-ups. And my mom's literally, at this point, 70 years old. And then she got up, I can do more push-ups than you. I said, yes, ma'am, you can. I'm going to ride that bike. And she would go to the gym, and she would try to ride the stationary bike. And her little trainer got my mom riding that stationary bike. She had fun doing that, and then she was going to ride a regular bike and chase her magic. She was always chasing that magic to ride the bike. Now I remember my mom's body laying on the floor, and my mom didn't get the opportunity to ride a regular bike, but she never stopped chasing that magic, and she did ride a stationary bike. The Wright Brothers, who owned a bike store, used to own a newspaper. It was kind of neat because they had all kinds of jobs. They had a bike, they had a newspaper shop, and they kind of went out of business. And then they were going to own a bike store, and they did. They lived with their sister. They never married, and they would work in this bike store in the evenings, during the day. In the evenings, they would go behind the bike store and work on building gliders. They had a little hero, Otto Lilienthal, who was a German man who made gliders. And Otto, one time flying his gliders, one went out on him, and he flew to his death, basically. That didn't stop the Wright brothers. The worry of death and moving forward with that just motivated them. They kept chasing that fun in the evenings. I could see them sitting in the back of their shop. Woohoo, we're having fun. I don't know if they drank a beer or not, but they were designing these wings. I don't know if they were telling dirty jokes. That's what men do, all by themselves. But they were having this fun building their glider. And then they found this place, we need a windy place. So they went to North Carolina, and they would take these gliders there, and then they attached a small motor to it. And on December 13th, 1903, chasing their fun, they filled their jar with magic with their first flight. It's a neat story about the Wright brothers, and there's so much more to them. Because one was injured to the point of death at one time, but they kept flying. Now my favorite here is Marshall Taylor, Major Marshall Taylor. He was an African American. And in the late 1800s, biking was all the craze. As a matter of fact, it was probably the fastest mode of transportation other than a horse. But biking was expensive. And when he was 13, he got a job in a bike shop. And the guy said, I need you to wear military garb. The owner would dress him in military garb, and he would do bike tricks outside the bicycle shop. Well, in this time in this country, obviously, they didn't allow black people to participate in major sports. It just wasn't heard of in America. But he had a friend. He said, I need you to open this gate for me. When they paused this race, he was going to go out and show them. So when they paused the race, like a little break, he burst out on the racetrack. And in this time and era, biking was so big, there were like 40,000 people that would attend these bike races. It was as big as baseball, maybe even bigger. And people saw how fast he was. And then he was sort of forced to allow him to race. But racing was very dangerous. He would get death threats, you're going to get lynched, all kinds of things. And they wouldn't allow him to race in certain cities, but they did allow him to race in Boston. So he raced and he set the world record, chasing his magic. Then he would go all over Europe, in Australia and Europe, and he would race. And for 10 years, he had fun riding his bicycle, even under the guise of those death threats and worries of people threatening him in his life. He pushed that to the side and he would ride that bike. And when you're having fun and doing what you want to do, you seem to have tunnel vision and you're just enjoying your life in that moment, even though it may only last for a few minutes. But he constantly chased his magic. He dominated the racing world for 10 plus years, traveling all over the world. He went to a rags to riches story. In the Great Depression, he lost everything, like many people, but he wrote his autobiography. And I'm sure while he's writing his autobiography, he's remembering the tales of racing these world champions and thinking about the time he filled his jar with magic. I don't know what your adventure is. I know for me, my adventure is I want to chase anything and everything that causes me anxiety, like public speaking. I like doing adventure races. And I got to push those worries back at me. When someone's looking at me in the audience when I'm speaking, and I'm thinking, oh no, they're judging me and everything I'm saying up here. It's hard for me sometimes, but I push them to the back of me, and I continue to have fun telling the stories I like to tell, and I want to chase my magic. When I'm doing those adventure races, which are the Spartan races, the Go Ruck races, it's usually with ex-military people, as I'm running during the race, and I know I'm coming up upon an obstacle, I think, oh, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be hard. But as I finish the obstacle and I pass it, I think, oh, I filled my jar with some magic. I don't know what your magic is. I don't know what your adventure is. But if you've lost it, like my one friend has, try to find your magic again. Push that worry behind you. Have that childlike adventure you did when we were children. Look for the fun in life and fill your jar with magic. Thank you very much. That's a good idea.
We shall.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, gosh, sorry.